So you know on weekend mornings when you could sleep in, but for some reason your brain kind of half wakes up and starts ticking. You start thinking about all the things you're going to do that day and all the things you didn't do yesterday. And oh, remember that thing from like 2 weeks ago? And your brain just won't be quiet so you can sleep in. That's what happened today. And so, let's talk about recipes. Hi guys, welcome to Mendoza Makes. I'm Michelle Mendoza, and today we are talking about recipes, all things recipes. Where to find them, how to tell if a recipe is good or not, how to store them and organize them so that you can find what you need easily once you have kind of a repertoire built up of good recipes that you like to have on hand, and how to read a recipe and how to use the recipe as a tool to teach you how to cook without a recipe. Much like the Cookie Basics series that I did, if you've watched that one, I'm gonna kind of split this up because there's a lot of information. This is gonna be a 3-part series on recipes. The first, this one, being how to find recipes and how to store recipes. A couple hints on how you can tell if a recipe is going to be good or not without having to waste ingredients trying it. First up in this video is where to find a recipe. Get yourself some iced coffee. Here we go. Cookbooks. Nowadays there are a wide variety of books available either in digital content or in actual book form that you can get at basically everywhere. So there are pros and cons to cookbooks or recipe books being your go-to for finding recipes. The good thing is they're usually available at hand-me-down stores like Goodwill, garage sales, like secondhand places, and sometimes you'll find one with notes in the margin that someone else had made, which is really neat and makes you feel like the Half-Blood Prince from Harry Potter. So that's pretty cool. I'd put that in the pro column. They're easy to find and they're usually fairly cheap too. I've found them for 25 cents before. Another pro is books like this that are kind of like starter books also have instructions in them. So like this one has measurement conversions on the front tab, and then when you go into each little tabbed section, it tells you about what's in here, and then it has the recipes. And then something that I really like are pages like this, especially when you first start cooking, because some of these things, I don't know what they are. Like if I want to try cooking new food and the recipe that I find calls for egg noodles, but I've never made egg noodles before and I don't know what they are, this is so helpful because it labels each kind of pasta. And it's not just for pasta. Pages like this are super helpful, and especially this at the top, it tells you where your cut of meat is coming from based on what it's called. Like this, it shows you the types of rice. I mean, that's pretty useful. And then in the back, it has a chart on the back for vegetables for how to boil, to steam, to saute, bake, roast, and microwave. So it tells you the temperature you need and how long you need to do it for. I mean, it's a lot of information all in one convenient place, which has been really helpful for me. And so books like this are really helpful, useful tools, especially when you're first starting out and you maybe don't know a lot of stuff. Pictures help a lot. And so if you're at the bookstore or you're at the used bookstore and you're flipping through pages, and like let's compare it to this book, for example. So this book is just recipes. It doesn't have any pictures, like it's just recipes, which is fine, but if I'm just starting out, this is so much more helpful by a long shot. I still use this all the time. However, some cons about books is first you have to store them. If you have them in digital content, then obviously they're digital and you don't have to worry about that. But I have to put these books somewhere. So that's kind of a con. Another con is a lot of the recipes, even in this book that's one of my favorites, I don't use, or I used to use, and now I know a better way of cooking it, so I don't use them anymore. Like, there's a whole section in this book about entertaining and how to set the table, and I'm like, I don't really need that. It's kind of just wasted, I feel like. You usually won't use every single recipe that's in the book. So some of it kind of feels like it's wasted. Like, there are some dishes in this book that I just don't eat, so I'm not going to make them. Or they're things that I don't like, or they're recipes that I already have a better way of making them. So I'm just not going to use them. What I'd recommend if you're looking through cookbooks and you're trying to find one that's going to work for you, if you're a starting home cook, this kind of book would be a great idea, even if you don't use all the recipes in it. That's one way to find a recipe, is just find it in a book. The second way to find a recipe is on the wonderful internet. Google. We live in an age where there are millions of free recipes online. If you have the internet, you have the power to just type in how to make literally anything, and I guarantee you a bunch of recipes will pop up, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff. The World Wide Web is a wonderful way to find recipes for free with the click of a button. You don't have to go out ahead of time and find the recipe that you want. You can decide what you want right then at that moment, Google it, and you're cooking 5 minutes later. The only issue with the internet and finding recipes on the internet is that anyone can put a recipe online. The difference is that cookbooks were published by someone, which means someone paid money to publish them, which also means that it's really highly likely that these recipes in the cookbook are tested and good. Online, not the same. They don't have to test them. There's no standard that they have to meet. You never know if it's going to be good or not when you find a recipe. So you kind of have to learn through trial and error how to figure out if it's a good recipe or not. As you go along, you'll see patterns in the recipes themselves that'll kind of trigger you, or that are red flags that say, this is probably not a good recipe, and also, ooh yeah, this is a great recipe, I really want to try this. Unfortunately, the best way and the only way to really know if a recipe is good or not is to make it. Now, that can also be kind of flawed, because if you're just starting out and you don't really have techniques down very well, and you make a new recipe and it doesn't turn out great, it might be the recipe, but it might also be your technique that needs some practice. So it's a lot of trial and error, honestly. I'll show you guys some of the websites that I use consistently that I've been using for a long time, and I know if I'm looking for this one recipe, I can go to this website and they'll probably have it, and I know it'll probably be good. And then I'll also show you how I store my recipes so I can keep them organized when I find them online. I'm just gonna pretend imaginary world right now. If I'm looking for a recipe for something that I want to make, let's say I want to make a certain dish of pasta. Bon Appetit is a great website that has a wide variety of recipes available. So if I'm looking to make a certain recipe, I usually just type in like if I want to make Cajun pasta. Wow, that's not how you spell Cajun. I'll just type in the thing that I want to make, and then I'll put Bon Appetit after it, and usually it'll come up with the recipe. And Bon Appetit has the Test Kitchen's Best, which is their recipes that they've tried a bunch of times and determined that they're like very consistent at coming out with the same result, and they're the best. A lot of those recipes are ones that I save and use all the time. And then it also has reviews. So something that is kind of an indicator to you if a recipe is going to be good online or not are the reviews. I also watch and learn a lot from Binging with Babish, which is now the Babish Culinary Universe on YouTube. So if you guys are looking for another like starting YouTube channel, Babish Culinary Universe is amazing. I get a lot of recipes and ideas from watching his YouTube channel. A lot of times I'll watch things that he's making and then I'm like, oh, that gives me an idea. And then I immediately get up and go make whatever it is. It kind of makes you excited to go try cooking something new. So I highly recommend his YouTube channel, and he also has a website with all the recipes like typed out so that you can easily save them, which is really convenient. Another YouTube channel that I use is Joshua Wiseman's channel. His channel is awesome. I've tried a bunch of recipes from his and they are pretty good. His videos are funny and he's knowledgeable. Like, it's good. So I highly recommend his channel. I'll put links to all of these in the description so you guys don't have to type them in, you can just click it. If I'm looking for baking recipes specifically, if I'm trying to make any type of bread, waffles, pancakes, the other day I made scones, I'll go to King Arthur Flour. They're usually really good about baking recipes. So like I said, there's pros and cons. I mean, I feel like the pros for using the internet to find recipes far outweigh the cons, but you just gotta be careful because sometimes you'll find recipes that aren't that great. Like I said, the only way to really know is to make the recipe, but then sometimes it's really disappointing to make a recipe and waste all the ingredients and it's not any good. Learning how to tell if a recipe is good or not is a really good skill to have. It takes a lot of practice and time and a lot of trial and error. So the first thing I'd recommend is when you're trying out new recipes, always make the recipe exactly how it is the first time. Obviously, if you're allergic to something, or like if you're lactose intolerant or you don't eat gluten, something like that, take those things into consideration when you're choosing the recipe that you want to use. I feel like that's kind of obvious, but just putting it out there. There are a few ways that you can kind of try to judge, or at least pick which recipe you want to try first and kind of guess if it's going to be good or not. They're pretty simple, so I'll just throw those out there and you guys can use them as you want. The first one is kind of obvious, which is the reviews. A lot of blog recipes will have like the blog on the top and then the recipe down below, and then below that they'll have reviews. Look at the reviews, that's a good indicator. Also, in the comments of the reviews, some people are very helpful and they give little notes like, oh, I made this, but I turned the temperature to 400 instead of 350 and it came out a lot better. So if you make the recipe how it is and you notice that it maybe needs more bake time or something, and you look at the reviews and you see people saying, oh, turn up the temperature, you could also try turning up the temperature. So it's also kind of builds this community of people talking about the recipe and troubleshooting, which is really cool. The next thing that I usually look for in a recipe is, does it ask for fresh ingredients? Using fresh ingredients in your cooking is a great and easy way to really make your recipes taste way better than using the frozen or canned or prepackaged alternatives. If a recipe calls for a canned or frozen or prepackaged version of something rather than the fresh ingredient, I'm more likely to be a little hesitant with that recipe. I'm most likely to use recipes that call for fresh ingredients on the front end. Usually a blog or the reviews or the website that you get the recipe from sometimes also says like you can use a canned version if you don't have the fresh version, which is great because sometimes you can't find the fresh version at your grocery store. Also, choose ingredients that you like. I mean, that sounds really obvious, but not a lot of people say it. Maybe because it's obvious, I don't know. Read through the ingredients and make sure that you like all of those ingredients and that you like them together, because sometimes there's ingredients in recipes that you like separately, but together they taste kind of weird to you, it's your personal preference. You're making it at your home, so you can make it however you like. And that's pretty simple. Just choose recipes with ingredients that you like to eat together. Also think about the portion of ingredients, and specifically what is the main ingredient in the recipe, because that's going to be where the most of the flavor is coming from. So take marinara sauce for an example. Marinara sauce is a tomato-based sauce. Therefore, tomatoes should be the main flavor and probably the highest portion content in the recipe. If a recipe, now I'm just making this up, I haven't seen a recipe like this or anything, but for an example, if I saw a recipe, if I was looking for marinara sauce, and I saw a recipe that called for 2 whole onions, 1 tomato, garlic, and oregano, I kind of think to myself, that looks like the ingredients that you should use, but the portions are off. I shouldn't use 2 onions and only 1 tomato for a tomato-based sauce. If I'm making marinara sauce, tomato should be the main ingredient, and therefore I should use more tomato than I do anything else in the recipe. So not only read what the ingredients are, but how much of each ingredient you're using compared to all the other ingredients. The very first thing that you should look at is the ingredients. Make sure you like all of them, make sure the portions are correct, but then also read through the directions and see what it's telling you to do. How is it telling you to make it? This is the part where experience comes in. The more experience you have and the better technique that you have making food, the easier it will be for you to gauge if directions in a recipe are telling you to do the right thing or not. So for example, usually the main steps in making bread are you mix the ingredients together, you let it bulk ferment, usually until it's doubled in size. Then you take it out, you shape the dough into whatever it's going to be, like if you're making rolls or a loaf of bread, whatever it is, roll it out, shape it, and you let it rest again, usually for an hour, 2 hours, until it's doubled in size again, maybe, some situations, and then you bake. Those are the very basic steps to usually most bread. If you've made bread a few times, you'll start noticing that pattern. And I'll go over more of this in the 3rd video in this series, which is going to be how to use recipes to teach yourself techniques of cooking. But just for this example, say that I was reading through a recipe and it told me to mix the ingredients and then shape the dough and then let it rest. Because I've made bread before and I know the basic steps of making bread, that doesn't fit in. It's one of those problems from when you're in elementary school and it's which one doesn't belong? So that to me is a red flag, and I would be maybe there's always a chance. I don't know everything. There's always a chance that I'm wrong and I'm still learning, but it does caution me where I'm really? You just shape it? You don't have to let it bulk ferment first? I do have a good example of this. I found a hamburger bun recipe that claimed that it was a 40-minute hamburger bun recipe, and I was no way can you make good hamburger buns in 40 minutes. Usually good and fast do not go together in cooking. But when things claim that they're good and they're fast, I'm usually I doubt it, but let's try. And in this instance, I tried the recipe, I tried the 40-minute hamburger bun, and they were okay. It wasn't as good as if I had spent the time to bulk ferment the dough and then shape it and make the bread steps the way you normally would, but it was fine. It wasn't bad. And you could really make the argument that the ingredients that you use on bad recipes or recipes that don't turn out as well, most of the time it's still edible food. It's just not as good as it could be. And you haven't really completely wasted the ingredients because at least you learned something from it. At least you can say, well, I tried that recipe and it didn't work out great. And then you can ask yourself, why? Why didn't it turn out great? That's something we will also go over in the 3rd video of this series. So those are just a couple of indicators that you can kind of start looking for, start thinking about the ingredients, the portion, look at the reviews to judge whether you want to try that recipe or not. At least pick one over another. If you're looking for any type of baking recipe, an immediate indicator that kind of slaps you in the face is it measured in weight? So this one, for example, 2 cups, but also they give you 240 grams. Now, baking and cooking are different. Baking is a lot more precise. If I find baking recipes that are measured in cups or tablespoons, teaspoons, that sort of thing, and not measured in grams or in ounces and weight, that's usually an indicator to me that I don't want to make it, because baking is very precise and there's good reason why they use weight in their recipes. And honestly, when I first started cooking, I was like, oh, I don't want to weigh my ingredients. Like, what a pain in the butt. And I didn't have a kitchen scale. Like, I didn't really see the point in it. I wanted to just use cups and tablespoons and stuff like I always had for everything. 2 things. Scales are super cheap. I'll put a link to one in my description. It's like $10 on Amazon. So easy, so cheap. Worth it. Because, number 2, accuracy is everything when you're baking. It really, really is. It makes a huge difference. I was very lazy about measuring my ingredients, and once I started actually paying attention and weighing them for baking, amazing. My bread, way better. Like everything, pancakes, waffles, like everything that I could bake, way better when I actually paid attention and measured the weight. When I'm looking for baking recipes now, if it doesn't offer a weight measurement, I usually am like, pass. Ah, we got a low battery. We need the charger. Oh God, we're losing her. Plug it in. It's dying, quick. Plug it in. Ugh. Looks like we're gonna continue this on the floor. So now that I've showed you guys kind of where I find recipes and how to weed through them a little bit, I'm going to show you how I store my recipes. Now, I used to make a book. So actually for a while I would print my recipes, and I made myself a cookbook basically, because the problem that I always felt with cookbooks is what I said earlier, is I wouldn't use all of the recipes in them. So I felt like they were kind of a waste. So I thought, oh, well, if I print recipes online that I found and I know I like, then all the recipes in my cookbook will be ones that I'll use. So I got a 3-ring binder, and I just used dividers like when you were in school, and I would print them and I just labeled them how it made sense to me. The other thing that I didn't like is how cookbooks would be organized. Like, some things didn't make sense to be in certain categories in my mind. So I made my own. I organized it based on what I thought would go in there, and then I would just print out the recipes and stick them in. I printed myself a template where I could just write in my own recipe and then keep it in here, and this was my cookbook. If you like having an actual book and you have a printer and you want to go this route, more power to you. However, if you're finding all your recipes online and you want a digital way to keep track of your recipes, organize them, and plan your meals, create a shopping list, that sort of thing, I have found the best app for this. This app is called Recipe Keeper. It is the best app for keeping track of your recipes, importing ones from websites. So easy. I found this and I was like, oh my God, this is so good. I will show you. This is what it looks like when I open it. All my recipes are here. My recently viewed are on the right hand side, and then on the left hand side I can manipulate things, add recipes, go to my shopping list, my meal planner. You can set timers from here if you want. I have this on my laptop, so what I do is I just set my laptop in the kitchen and I use it to cook from there. It's really easy. You can put it on your tablet, your smartphone, your laptop like I do. I mean, it's across a bunch of platforms. What I did first to try this is just download the free version, because I wanted to try it out and see if I liked it before I actually paid for the paid version. So I tried it and I was like, oh my God, You can import recipes with a URL, because I find most of my recipes online. I just Google things like I showed you guys a minute ago. When you go to download this, they advertise it as if you'll be able to use the paid version on all platforms and access your recipes on all of your devices. But what it doesn't specify is that you have to pay for the paid version on each of those devices, not just once. So if I wanted to use my laptop and my phone, I'd have to pay for the pro version on my laptop and also pay for the pro version on my phone. It's not like you pay once and then you can use it on everything. But they don't specify that. So that kind of irked me a little bit, to be honest. And if you read the reviews on this, you'll see that a bunch of other people have said the same thing. But I still use it because that's how good it is. And it's totally worth the $5. The main reason that I use this is it is super easy. So the way that I find recipes, I just showed you guys, is mainly online. So what I'll do is Google what I want to make, find the recipe I want to use, and then I go to add new recipe here on the left, and you can import it from a website. You can type, this add new recipe will let you just type in whatever you want. If you want to do that, you're creating your own recipe or copying down one. You can import it from a website. You can scan a recipe from a photo and also from a PDF. But what I use the most of the time is the import recipe from website. So I'm going to click on that and it takes me to this page. What I have to do here is just copy and paste the URL. I'm going to go here and copy, so Control-C for copy. And then I'm just going to Control-V to paste it here, and then I'm going to hit this little search. And then what it's going to do is pull up the recipe. It separates it for me into the directions and the ingredients. It gives me the photo, it gives me the title, it gives me the source that I got it from, the serving size, the time that it takes to make it. I can then put it into categories that make sense to me if I want to. I can put it into categories here. It's maybe a muffin? I don't know, I'm not going to give it a category. I can put it into collections if I want. See, I have Thanksgiving here, so meals that I make for Thanksgiving. And then I just go here and hit save. And then I'm going to save and close. And then when I'm done, this is what the recipe looks like. Up here, I can click on this and it'll take me to the website if I want. If this source that it has with the website is really nice for those blogs, because some of the blogs actually have really good information and tips about how to make it that are not included in the directions of the recipe itself. So if you read through and you're like, oh, I don't really remember when you go to make it, you can click on the link that's offered right there and go back and read the blog, and usually that's helpful. That's super nice that they have the source right there. You can adjust the recipe, which is really, really cool. So easy. So I'm going to make this for 2 people, and it's going to automatically, see what happened? It's going to automatically cut all of the ingredients. I don't have to do any math. It does it all on its own. But wait, there's more. Another thing that I absolutely love about this is the format. Because on my laptop, I don't know if it'll be different on your smartphone. Honestly, I haven't used it on my smartphone, so disclaimer, this is on my laptop. One of the struggles that I have with using my smartphone for cooking in the kitchen is that usually recipes on blogs and such have the ingredients listed on the top, and then you have to scroll down for the directions. But then when you're reading the directions, it'll say like, mix the flour, sugar, and salt, and then add the eggs, water, and I don't know, something else. But when it says that, I have to scroll back up and go, oh, but how much? Like, I need the measurement. And usually recipes don't put the measurements in the directions because they're already listed in the ingredients, so it's kind of redundant. So I get that part. But what ends up happening is you have to scroll up and down constantly, like, oh, how much? how many eggs, and then scroll back down. What did it want me to do? And then like scroll back up, and then how much of that did it want me to add? Okay, this much. And then scroll down. Okay, what did it want me to do? And like add that. So I have my messy hands all over my phone, and that's no good. So what this does on my laptop anyway, and I hope you can see this, is that it puts the ingredients and the directions next to each other so that I can read the directions and see how the measurements at the same time. So helpful. I don't have to touch my laptop at all. That alone is enough for me to pay for this and use it all the time. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh man, that's actually pretty useful. Okay, maybe I'll go look for it and try it. But wait, there's more. So, now, say that I try this recipe from King Arthur flour for blueberry scones, and I'm like, you know what? It says 20 minutes here, but mine were done pretty quickly in only 15 minutes, and I didn't really need those extra 5, so I want to remember that for next time. You can make notes. If I go up here to edit, it brings up the entire recipe that I can type wherever I want. So you can change the ingredients if you need to. I can type in here, I can delete, I can adjust whatever I want. I can change the directions if I want to, or like separate them, because this one is actually just one paragraph, so I might not be able to find things so easily, so I can just, like separate it like this. Number 2, do this thing. And then over here, I can make notes. So, bake for 15 minutes. Now, I would caution you about changing the actual recipe until you absolutely know that that's what you want to do from now on. Because once you change it in here, the only way that you'll really remember that you changed it is if you go back to the source website that you first got it from. Otherwise, if you change it in here and you continue making it that way and it ends up not being a good change, you'll continue doing that change the wrong way because you changed the recipe in here, like the base recipe that you're using. So what I'd recommend first is to make notes, and then once you find that the notes are like, yes, this change is good and I'm going to use this every time, then change the recipe like over here in the directions and the ingredients. But the notes are really good. And then once I change it, I'm going to hit save, and then it takes me back here, and my note will be over here underneath the ingredients on the left. Bake for 15 minutes. I mean, just the amount of utility is so useful. It's so useful. It's just so good. It's just so good. You can share the recipe if you want, and if you wanted to do kind of both on the computer digital content and a book, or a nice gift idea might be to make someone a cookbook that you have tried the recipes. So maybe you're wanting to print some of them off or something like that. You can go up here to print and print them off. Super easy. You can favorite ones that you like. You can change the text. I mean, manipulate literally everything about this. That's just the recipe portion of this app. There's even more. You can add things to your shopping list. This would probably be especially helpful for those of you who have jobs and kids and busy life, and you like to plan your meals out so that you make sure you get all the ingredients you need from the grocery store in one trip. You don't have to forget anything and go back later. Planning your meals for the week and that sort of thing. You can it has a meal planner over here, and you can add whatever you want to add, and it comes up with the recipe and the date. You can put your notes here if you want, that sort of thing. And it has a shopping list. So whatever recipes I added to my meal planner, I can add to my shopping list as well. And then when I'm in the store, I can pull it up on my phone and it'll give me the measurements, which is sometimes useful and sometimes not. So things like 16-ounce can of evaporated milk or something like that, then I know, okay, I need the 16-ounce can, I'm gonna grab that. But like this 2 cups of warm water, like obviously I'm gonna use tap water. I'm not gonna buy 2 cups of warm water from the grocery store, that's silly. And salt and vegetable oil, like, you know, they don't come in those containers. You're just gonna measure it from oil that you have in your kitchen. But what's most important is making sure that you have everything that you need for a recipe. And the fact that it includes those small items is really good, because those are the ones that I'm probably gonna forget. Like if I'm making chicken pasta, I'm not really going to forget the chicken and the noodles, because those are 2 main ingredients. But I might forget, oh, I'm out of salt, or I'm out of oil, I need to get some more. But this includes all of those small things that you might forget. Whew. Okay, I think that's it so far. I hope this helped give you guys some tips about where to look for some beginner recipes, and maybe some beginner YouTube channels you can also check out other than mine. I really recommend, if you guys are looking for recipes or you're new to cooking and you're kind of like, hey, where do I look for some material information to help teach me new things in the kitchen, I really recommend using multiple sources. Don't just watch one YouTube channel, or don't just read one book and use it as your single source. Really, the best way you're going to teach yourself is if you use a variety of sources. Watch like a bunch of different YouTube channels, read a bunch of different books, look at different websites, compare them, try different ideas, because that's how you're going to get really good information, and you can use the information that's going to work for you from each source. You know, there are some things that I watch Binging with Babish and I'm like, oh yeah, like I should try that thing, and then there's other things that I'm like, I don't need to really do that, or I'm okay without it. And that's okay. Just take the information that you need to learn from it and leave all the rest. But I really recommend using multiple resources, not just one. Next week I'm going to go into more detail about how to read a recipe and like the technicality of it, so you guys can hopefully understand that more. And then after that, we'll conclude this series of recipes with how to use recipes as a tool to teach yourself how to cook without a recipe. If you learned something in this video, give it a like. If you'd like to learn more, you can subscribe to my channel. I upload every Friday. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!